Time for yet another review of a classic LucasArts adventure game. LucasArts was never huge on sequels, and the only one of their adventure games to have more than one was obviously the Monkey Island series. There was a sequel to their first Scum game, Maniac Mansion, called Day of the Tentacle, but only one other besides that one. Another interesting thing is that LucasArts rarely used Lucasfilm's IPs as the basis of their games, instead creating their own. At least before the Star Wars prequel films came and changed that. LucasArts' first adventure game, Labyrinth, changed that trend, and a few years later LucasArts released an adventure game based on the third Indiana Jones movie, The Last Crusade. What then followed was an original Indiana Jones title, The Fate of Atlantis. It was so well received amongst LucasArts fans that many took to calling it by the shorthand name Indy 4. Remember, this was before Kingdom of the Crystal Skull had come out. In fact, a lot of fans have said that they felt Fate of Atlantis should have been the basis of an Indiana Jones film. Last year I finally got to play it for myself, and here's what I thought about it. The game starts with Indy looking around the dark attic when... Whoa! Okay, I didn't expect that. Maybe this rope will... What? Ah, jeez. Oh well, gonna look at these books. What the hell? Jesus. I know Indiana Jones tends to take a beating, but this looks like it could have come from a frickin' Buster Keaton film. So after stumbling around, Indy finds a statue in the basement of the building, which is actually just across the street from his workplace, Barnett College. After breaking off this intense staring contest between Marcus and this guy called Smith, which is totally his real name.
You don't look at all well, Dr. Jones.
Indy gets in a fight, loses the statue, and then finds out that Smith was actually a Nazi by the name of Kerner. Indy tracks a former colleague, Sophia, who has turned psychic and gives lectures on Atlantis. It turns out the Nazis are after the Lost City and a mystery metal called orichalcum, which they hope to use to win the war. So Sophia and Indy start their trek to locate the city and stop the Nazis. Let's start with the good aspects before I say anything negative about the game. Firstly, I think Doug Lee does an excellent job as the voice of Indy. He doesn't really sound anything like Harrison Ford, but he has a really likable delivery and fits the part well. His performance is definitely head and shoulders above the rest of the voice cast. The graphics are mostly really nice, and there's a lot of detail. The character animations are solid, but some of the more complicated sequences have been done with just the dolls, which looks more than just a little lazy. I'm genuinely amazed because this game was made after such groundbreaking Scum titles as Monkey Island 1 and 2, as well as Loom. So I think the tech could have handled it. The detail is really good though for little animations, so I'm not going to complain much. I especially love the detail of Indy's eyesight improving slowly in dark areas. The music is a bit of a mixed bag, despite the fact that all the iconic LucasArts composers Michael Land, Peter McConnell, and Clint Bajakian worked on the title. But it's never terrible, and has that fun old-school MIDI feel to it. One aspect where this game is also unusual is how it gives you a lot of freedom with puzzles. Many of them have alternate solutions, and some actually have randomized solutions each time you play. This randomizing factor makes it so the game can feel quite different at times, but it's actually a neat idea. There's a part you can even ditch Sophia and just go venturing on your own. Admittedly, this randomization makes it a bit tricky if you have to look up solutions in a walkthrough, but it's definitely a very novel concept. You can also tackle a lot of parts of this game by either fighting people or avoiding them. Yes, there's actually a fighting mechanic built into the game. Although it does feel a bit out of place for an adventure game, like I said, you often have the option to avoid fights and so don't have to actually rely on your fisticuffs. In all, that makes this into a very original entry from the LucasArts adventure game library, but that doesn't mean it's all great. My biggest criticism of this game is the plot, which is just a beat-for-beat repeat of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Just replace the big golden box with a lost city and it's very much the same. Indy loses a valuable artifact at the start, has to recruit a female sidekick he has some bad blood with, and the bad guys are defeated at the end by their own hubris. There's even a fucking submarine. Apart from that, none of the locations are really as interesting as Raiders, but more to the point, I don't see how making this into a movie would have been better than a completely fresh new idea. Even the villains are really bottom tier stuff, and before any of you make cracks about Kate Blanchett's accent, just listen to this.
Dr. Uberman, fantastic news.
And it glitters like fire! Exactly as Plato described. I never guess. We must test.
Jesus Christ. These are your villains for this game. An Aryan specimen and a crazy scientist with not even a vaguely convincing German accent. Coupled with the silly opening, you'd think this game was based on Indiana Jones the Animated Series, more than an actual indie film. But alright, suppose you're willing to accept the plot in all its plagiaristic glory and these generic German villains. There's still a lot about this game that brings my piss to a boil. The first thing is the very first part of the game where you're actually traveling around. It looks cool on the offset. They even do the red line on a map thing from the movies. However, these 4 locations you can travel between are all only 1 or 2 screens in scope. In the first part of the game, what you're literally doing is just flying from place to place talking to people. Yeah, you remember that part where Indy flew to the Himalayas, said a few words to Mary, and then got on a plane to Thailand to buy some gum and then flew back to fight the bad guys? No? That's because airfare is expensive and that would be fucking stupid. There's no point going to the Azores at the start until you've actually done everything. But even that doesn't beat the stupidity of flying to Iceland just to talk to a freaking Swedish guy in a cave. Really, Tikal is the only part of the beginning that's any fun, except in order to advance you have to do this horrific shit.
Good old Mother Nature.
What? Did I just murder a capybara because Indiana Jones is too big of a pussy to go near an anaconda? I'm sorry, I know I'm an adult and this kind of thing shouldn't faze me, but I'm just stunned that the game actually forces me to do that in order to climb onto a fucking tree. From there on out, the game's locations luckily start to become more open, and Algiers is the first place that actually starts to feel like a traditional LucasArts adventure game locale. But the first really expansive part is the labyrinth underneath Crete. That's kinda sad. We had to go to a frickin' dark cave to get into a larger area of the game. Finally, you do reach Atlantis, where you have to either sneak around Nazi soldiers or bash them in one-on-one fights. And again, we have a fairly large area. Sure, there's a lot of rooms that don't do anything, but it's still way better than just traipsing between countries that are represented by only 1 or 2 screens. Unfortunately, Atlantis is probably the point at which you'll start to lose your patience with the game's puzzles. Getting the orichalcum machine to work isn't much of a big deal, but then you come to the frickin' robot statue you have to rebuild in order to get deeper into the city. This shit sucks. There's no clues or any kind of indication on where these pieces go. The game doesn't even give you feedback if you put the pieces in the wrong place. So unless you have a lot of time on your hands to try out every possible combination, you are not solving this puzzle without consulting a walkthrough. But the most infuriating part of this game is probably Sophia. Now I get that Indy argues with pretty much all his leading ladies, but Sophia really doesn't have a sympathetic bone in her body. Indy refuses to believe that she can actually commune with the Atlantean king Nureb-Sal, and Sophia keeps making belittling jokes about Indy. Also, when I started the game and realized there were 2 main characters, I was actually looking forward to playing as Sophia too, but you only ever get to use her once or twice throughout the whole game. Really? What the hell was it with LucasArts not wanting you to control more than one character? Also, you don't spend nearly as much time talking to characters in this game as other LucasArts games. After the Algiers part, you don't really talk to anyone. And I felt the dialogue was really lacking that classic LucasArts wit. The only time there's any real jokes in the game is when you're talking to Sophia, so basically the game's forcing me to care about a character who is just the worst. Once you get closer to the center of the city, you'll notice Sophia becoming possessed by the spirit of Nureb-Sal. Playing through the game the first time, I didn't pay it much mind until the finale where Sophia basically gets herself killed in the heart of the city. Even though this is the bad ending of the game, when I first saw it, my reaction was this. But of course I then looked up how you get the good ending where you free Sophia from Nureb-Sal's control and then get to make out with her on the U-boat as Atlantis sinks. Great. Now I'm not saying Fate of Atlantis doesn't have its good points, and it's definitely a game that grows on you a bit after you play it. However, if you're jumping into it for the very first time with no clue of what's in store for you, you'll be stumbling around, clicking on everything a gazillion times, and getting ever more frustrated until you're just sick of the game. It has so many terrible design choices that I found it difficult to really focus on the task at hand. To be fair, there are large chunks of this game that you can easily complete just by using logical deduction, but then once in a great while the game just throws a complete curveball at your nuts, which just makes you wish you were playing anything else. Quite frankly, it's not the Indiana Jones game I would have wanted, but if you're curious or just want a challenge, there's enough substance in this to entertain you for a while. And that's all from me for now. I'm Hannu the Hande Mäkinen, see you on the next one.